Cool. So we just great. Let's go back to that. There you go. I'm assuming everyone can hear me. I can't actually tell if you can or not. So let's hope so. Cool. So yeah, but today I'm going to talk to you about video game broadcasts. But first off, just sort of say who I am. Just like Christiana before, I am a fifth year student, just writing on my PhD as it is. I actually have not really been, I've been working in deep learning mostly in a very sort of specific area, trying to do highlight detection for esports games. So using audio-visual data and also text data from chats to sort of find the interesting and the cool moments. But today I'm talking to you very broadly about all of sort of broadcasting games in general, because I think that they're very important, and I think they're becoming increasingly important in sort of the video games ecosystem. But I don't think they get the kind of the attention they deserve, both from industry and from academics. So hopefully I can convince you that you should care about them more by this talk. So firstly, let's talk about what a video game broadcast is. I'm going to be talking about a fairly sort of broad definition. This is my personal definition here. Basically, it's any sort of transmission of video game content via whatever electronic means you want to do. And really, what I'm going to be talking to you about is sort of three main areas. And the first two I want to focus on more than the last one. So I think most people, when they think about video game broadcasts, will be thinking about live streams. So Twitch, these are sort of where people are live broadcasting themselves. People can interact via the chat. They have a very low barrier to entry. They're very easy to get started, which I think is partly part of their attraction. But we also have edited videos, which aren't as interactive because people can only interact after a video has been posted. But they do also have a similar low barrier to entry, and they focus on edited videos, kind of put together rather than sort of live interactions. And finally, we have the traditional broadcasts. Old media, high entry, BBC, Sky, whoever. These can be live or edited, but usually they don't have the sort of interactivity features baked into them that platforms like Twitch and YouTube do. And the second sort of distinction I want to make is between what I call personality-driven broadcasts and game-driven broadcasts. So personality-driven broadcasts are what most people would think of, I think, are from Twitch. So you have a streamer who is kind of the personality presenting their gameplay, and that you're really watching it for their entertaining value. But game-driven broadcasts are your esports games. These are games where the game and the gameplay is the most important thing, not the entertainment value from the streamer themselves. And here we have, PlayerUnknown Battleground, but they're presented in slightly different ways because one of them is personality-driven and one of them is game-driven. So first off, I want to sort of talk about like the general entertainment sort of aspects of streaming, of broadcasting and how popular it is. So streaming being the first one. We've seen a huge growth over the last couple of years in Twitch viewership. And now it sits at roughly sort of over 2 million average viewers, and it can be upwards of 6 million peak viewership every day. Now this, it's really hard to compare these numbers to, say, a TV show broadcast, because a TV show broadcast is happening, maybe for an hour at a certain time, and people will tune into it watching every single week, whereas we're talking average viewers across a whole 24-hour cycle every day. And actually what we do notice, if you see the second graph here, is that there is like a peak and trough effect that we see where, depending on the time zones people are in, I think it's mostly America, peak America times when Americans are awake, we'll have a lot more viewers than times where Americans are generally asleep. And sort of going towards edited broadcasts, we see that, again, like YouTube is becoming increasingly popular. People are searching for gaming on YouTube a lot more. The biggest thing here, I think, is that Google are saying that the kind of the video game content industry is a nearly $10 billion industry. And to contrast that, PC gaming, which is just PC gaming, not mobiles or not console gaming, but just PC gaming, is a $35 billion industry. So it's already a quarter of that industry, which is significantly more established. And it's a growing industry. So it really is starting to become a popular thing. And finally, as a sort of an effect of the pandemic, mostly, I think we've seen a large change in the willingness for traditional broadcasters to broadcast video game content. Now, this is mostly esports games, games which are like a virtual simulacra to a physical game. Racing games, Formula One, NASCAR, etc., but also things like NFL football games, that kind of thing. BBC being slightly different here because the BBC have been committed to broadcasting esports tournaments for quite a few years now. So they've been doing this for a lot longer than the others, but the others, when physical games were cancelled during coronavirus, they pivoted quite quickly to virtual games. I just want to highlight also Jinx, which are an esports channel. All they do is esports all the time. So let's talk about broadcasters' performance. This might be a slightly strange thing to think about if you haven't really thought about this stuff too deeply before, but actually live streaming, we're really talking here about personality-driven broadcasts. They are a performance. They are a sort of a bizarre, strange kind of performance where often Dr. Disrespect is slightly different, but most streamers are trying to act like your friends, act very friendly, welcoming to you. But really, this is a performance they have to put on across the course of their streams, and their streams can be incredibly long, 5-6 hours long. Well, they have to have this performance going. Obviously, Dr. Disrespect is a very different type of performance where it's much more clearly a character that the streamer is playing, but it's still a performance. And the performance aspect of this does have a sort of a slight negative aspect, and this is probably the most negative aspect of live streaming that I can kind of think about, which is that there has a huge emotional labor cost to doing this, and this is mostly Woodcock and Johnson's work, as I mentioned in the previous slide. And to highlight this, I just want to show you this video. Now, these are two professional YouTubers who don't do video game content on YouTube, but they do video game content on Twitch as part of their kind of content delivery package. They're talking about this emotional effect that live streaming has.
It's easy to forget that, we're people behind it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time we put those because you have to appreciate, we're away from it all. It's great that we will hang out, but when you do those streams, we're entertaining.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to, even when you have those days when you don't want to be there, you sort of Pagliacci face it and you do it. And it's interesting to hear you talk about stuff like self-doubt.
I want to do the best of what I can do, and I don't know if that matches up to what other people sort of perceive and stuff. So I just doubt myself a lot, and recently I've just been going through a lot of things in my head to the point where I was like, I don't know if I can stream anymore. I was having panic attacks walking home from work.
Time that water break very poorly there. So that's kind of the emotional labor aspect of live streaming, but it's not all doom and gloom.
It's easy to.
So one thing that's really interesting about live streaming is and other broadcast mediums is that because you can interact with your audience, you can now start to develop video games which are interactive. And so there's a couple of examples here, but really this is I think a really rich design space. Now, I'm not a game designer, but I think it's a very large design space which hasn't really been explored to its full extent. And there are some interesting challenges here. How do you make a game which is interactive and sort of appealing to a streamer, but also is a game which kind of functions without that interactivity if the person isn't streaming? So the other kind of next aspect of live streaming is kind of the community aspect of live streaming. So Twitch is a social network. It's a kind of strange social network because there are two roles. There is the streamer role and the viewer role, but it is a social network. And here's some work which kind of shows these communities. This is a kind of a social network graph. Each of these nodes is a streamer, and each of the kind of lines between them is the shared viewership between different videos. And each color is a kind of different genre or different type of stream. So we see, for instance, the League of Legends people up in this corner here, this kind of pale blue color, they are pretty insular. Most League of Legends streamers, the viewers who watch those don't watch other streams. But if you take some of the more variety streamers in the middle, they share huge viewerships among themselves. And so this is a fairly untapped area of research or understanding how these live streamers work, but I think it's a pretty rich one. And one of the clear ways we can do this is by chat. Now, chat is really hard. My research into modeling chat has been incredibly tough because it's noisy. It has lots of these stream-specific words that we don't know necessarily what the actual kind of meaning is behind them. But it is also one of the key ways that we can measure audience reactions to a stream and then thus reactions to a game. And so one thing I want to highlight is that we're seeing often these kind of two aspects of streaming. So we see chance, which is where we have a larger stream, often on an esports game. People are just kind of reacting in the way that you might react in a football match, chanting or kind of cheering if certain things happen in the game. But also for smaller streamers, and especially strategy game streamers, we see a lot more discourse, actually, like a lot more discussion, which is can be quite interesting to sort of analyze. And the final thing I want to talk about in terms of communities is that actually celebrities are starting to use live streaming to reach their community. So here we have two streamers. To anybody who don't know who these streamers are, this might look like normal streaming. They're kind of just a standard two people streaming, but actually, we have a very famous politician and we have a professional Formula One driver. Now, these two people are streaming for very different reasons. They're looking to reach the audience, but almost certainly with different goals or different target demographics. Yet we see that live streaming content creation is a really key way of doing that for them. And so finally, let's talk about advertising. You're using broadcasts to advertise your game. So the key thing is Twitch sells games. Like, this is just a fact. There are certain games that becoming popular on Twitch is a massive boon for. So Among Us being a classic example, you can see here in this graph, the red is the number of people watching Among Us, and kind of lagged slightly behind it, but clearly following the trend is the number of players playing the game on Steam. And also Twitch themselves have said, 25% of the sales of these games, Punch Club and The Culling, are directly down to the fact they got popular. So, potentially if you're an indie studio, if you can find a way to really market your game via Twitch, it might really do well for you. Talking of marketing, the classic story of Apex Legends, for those who don't know, Apex Legends, basically, it wasn't announced. It wasn't announced until one day, people went onto Twitch and suddenly there were 2 million plus viewers watching this game that hadn't been talked about before. And what they had done is they had paid basically all of the big streamers, all the popular streamers, to stream their game at the same time on the same day, and use that as a marketing strategy. And as far as I can tell, they believe it was a success, and certainly it got a lot of buzz, and a lot of kind of people outside of EA were talking about it as if it was successful. And we also have the case of Bossa. So Bossa, with the original Surgeon Simulator, did really well in the really early days of the edited broadcast kind of area, YouTube gaming kind of sphere. And they've now started doing this Creators Club, where they are rewarding people for making content with their games, because I think they recognize the marketing that it provides. So finally, of course, I have to have one slide talking about my own research. So I've been looking into highlight detection for live streams, and I kind of have two focuses on what I'm doing. So the first thing is video summarization for esports matches. So can we use deep learning to essentially watch a match happening in real time and edit that video down into a short highlight clip? As you see, this is an edited by AI clip here. Can we do that, and then can we post that to YouTube or to Twitter or wherever instantaneously to kind of bolster your advertisement for your esports game, or just provide a sort of a secondary entertainment stream? And that might be the whole match second it's finished, or it might be even uploading clips whilst the game is going on to entice people to come and watch the game live. And secondly, I think these sorts of tools can be a really interesting set of tools for streamers who are smaller, who maybe don't have the time or the resources to pay for an editor or edit their own videos. They can potentially use automated highlight detection tools to build their edited highlights and then post them on YouTube and to increase their following. So in conclusion, video game broadcasts are popular. They are interesting avenues of design. They foster communities and they sell games. So that's all I have time for today. This could have easily been a much longer talk, but unfortunately we only have 15 minutes. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, that would be great.